Welcome back to The Legacy Ignited. You're about to witness a story of courage, betrayal, and a choice that no one saw coming. The entire town had gathered, buzzing with curiosity and hidden judgment, as Judge Harlan made an announcement that would change one girl's life forever. Pick any wife for free. He laughed, his voice echoing like thunder through the hall, leaving the crowd frozen in disbelief. Every eye turned to her, the girl nobody noticed, the one everyone overlooked. But when he pointed at her, the air itself seemed to shiver. Shock, fear, and a flicker of hope collided in her chest as whispers erupted around her, calling her unworthy, mocking her very existence. Little did anyone know, this choice would uncover secrets, test courage, and reveal a truth nobody saw coming. What happens next will shock you, break your heart, and leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about fate, judgment, and courage. If you love stories that touch the heart and stay with you long after, join our journey, subscribe, and be part of our family. Hit like so we can keep bringing you tales that inspire, shock, and move you. The day the announcement came, the entire town seemed to hold its breath. Word had spread like wildfire that Judge Harlan, the wealthy, eccentric man whose presence dominated every gathering, was hosting a peculiar event. Pick any wife for free. He had laughed in the town square, his voice booming across the dusty streets, a mischievous grin tugging at the corners of his mouth. At first, people thought it was a joke, the kind of story parents would tell their children around the fire and then chuckle over. But when the invitations appeared, handwritten on thick parchment, and delivered to every household, the gravity of the situation sank in. This was real. A man of immense wealth, with influence that stretched beyond the county line, was offering a bride of his choosing at no cost, and the entire town would bear witness to it. The idea alone stirred a mixture of awe, fear, and curiosity in everyone who heard it. People whispered in corners, speculating on who would be brave enough to attend, who would be chosen, and what sort of life awaited the woman who dared to step into this strange spectacle. Among those in the crowd, a girl named Elsie Miller stood quietly near the back. She was unlike the other young women present, not polished or groomed for display, but solid, round, and unassuming. Her family had always lived on the edges of town, their modest farm work keeping them distant from the gossip and glances that seemed to follow everyone else. Elsie's clothes were simple, patched in places, her hair pulled back with a worn ribbon, and yet there was a steady, unshakable dignity in the way she held herself. Her heart thumped violently as she watched Judge Harlan stand at the dais, a crowd of men and women hanging on his every word. His eyes, sharp and calculating, swept across the room as if weighing the worth of every person present, every gesture, every flicker of fear or excitement. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder, a wave of speculation and judgment rolling through the air like an approaching storm. Women shifted uneasily, brushing down skirts and smoothing hair, while men exchanged looks of disbelief and amusement. "He'll never choose her," one whispered, nodding toward Elsie. "She's too different." But Elsie's attention never wavered. She had spent her life being overlooked, discounted, dismissed. The idea of anyone seeing her, of her having a chance, even in such a humiliating and bizarre contest, ignited a flicker of hope in her chest she hadn't felt in years. When the time came, Judge Harlan's voice rang out louder than ever. "Step forward, ladies, all of you," he commanded, and the room seemed to tense as one by one the young women obeyed. The polished, slender, and brightly dressed women moved forward gracefully, smiles painted on their faces, their families beaming with pride. The contrast between them and Elsie could not have been more pronounced. She lingered at the back, hesitant, knowing that the eyes of the crowd would judge her harshly. The laughter of Judge Harlan echoed through the room, his amusement cutting like a knife. "Oh, this is going to be fun," he said, his gaze sweeping the women like a man inspecting livestock, calculating value, curiosity, and entertainment all at once. Elsie felt a wave of heat rush to her cheeks. She had been mocked before, called names behind her back, ridiculed for her size and quiet nature. But today felt different. Today, for reasons she could not yet name, she did not want to shrink away. She wanted to be seen. She wanted to be chosen. Her mother's gentle voice, long gone from the world, seemed to whisper in her memory, "You are more than they see. You are strong, you are kind, and your heart will carry you far." That thought steadied her, giving her courage to step forward when the last name on the list had been called. The room seemed to grow smaller as she approached the dais. Every eye was on her now, every whisper sharper, every judgment heavier. She felt their stares, the disbelief, the suppressed laughter, and yet she did not falter. Judge Harlan leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing as he assessed her, the silence stretching unbearably. The crowd held its collective breath, anticipating a snide remark, a cruel joke, some display of disdain from the judge. Instead, after a long pause that felt like eternity, he laughed, not a small laugh, but a deep, resonant, echoing sound that made the walls tremble and hearts leap with anxiety and anticipation. "I'll take the obese Amish girl," he declared, his voice carrying across the hall. The words hit Elsie like a physical blow. Whispers erupted instantly, shocked murmurs bouncing off the walls like gunshots. Some covered their mouths in astonishment, others laughed nervously, uncertain if they should be horrified or amused. Elsie froze, her heart pounding, her mind struggling to reconcile the strange mix of humiliation and validation. He had said it, he had chosen her, but why? Was it ridicule? Was it some cruel joke meant to entertain the town at her expense? Her stomach churned with a storm of fear, confusion, and a flicker of something that felt dangerously like hope. Judge Harlan's eyes, dark and unreadable, met hers. There was a glint of amusement, yes, but also curiosity. Something in his gaze lingered on her longer than on the others, a strange intensity that made the whispers in the room fade into a distant hum. Elsie forced herself to meet his gaze, though her knees shook and her hands trembled. There was a question in her, unspoken yet palpable. Why her? And in that moment, something shifted. For the first time in her life, she was the center of someone's attention, not because she had conformed to society's expectations, but because she existed in her own right, solid, quiet, strong in ways the others could not understand. As she was led toward the front, the world seemed to spin around her. Faces blurred, voices melted into a distant hum, and all that remained was the judge, the dais, and the impossible reality that she, Elsie Miller, had been chosen. The weight of every eye, every judgment, every whisper pressed upon her, but beneath it, a spark ignited, a spark of determination and courage she had never allowed herself to feel before. What awaited her beyond this day, she could not know. The future stretched out like an uncertain path, filled with mystery, danger, and the possibility of something miraculous. The judge's voice cut through her thoughts again, calm now, deliberate. "Do you understand what this means?" he asked, his tone softening, carrying an edge of seriousness that made the crowd lean forward in anticipation. Elsie swallowed, trying to steady her racing heart. I think so, sir," she whispered, her voice trembling. It means I have a choice, a life I never thought I could have." His eyes narrowed slightly, almost as if measuring the truth in her words, before he leaned back and smiled, that enigmatic, infuriating smile that promised nothing and everything at once. The crowd erupted once more, a mixture of awe, disbelief, and whispered scandal filling the air. Some shook their heads, unable to comprehend how he could choose someone so overlooked, someone so different. Others watched with wide eyes, sensing that something extraordinary was unfolding before them, a story that would be whispered for generations. Elsie, at the center of it all, felt a strange calm settle over her, a fragile thread of courage weaving through her chest, binding her fear, her hope, and her determination into a single, unbreakable resolve. She did not know what awaited her in the days to come. She did not know if this choice would lead to happiness, heartbreak, or something far more complicated than she could imagine. But she knew, with a certainty she could not yet explain, that her life had changed forever. And as the judge's eyes met hers one final time that day, a silent understanding passed between the man, understanding that the story had only just begun, and that the journey ahead would test her strength, her courage, and her heart in ways she could never have anticipated. And so, amid the whispers, the laughter, and the astonished stares of the town, Elsie Miller took her first step into a world that had once seemed impossible. A world where the unexpected choice of a judge could turn a life upside down, revealing truths, secrets, and challenges that would shape her in ways she could never have imagined. The day had begun with laughter, with mockery, with disbelief, and yet, beneath it all, a story was unfolding, one that would change not just her life, but the lives of everyone who watched. The days that followed the judge's unexpected choice were a whirlwind of confusion, fear, and startling new experiences. Elsie Miller had left her small, familiar farmhouse, stepping into a world that felt both dazzling and terrifying. Judge Harlan's estate was unlike anything she had ever imagined. Towering stone walls, polished wooden floors that gleamed like glass, chandeliers that spilled golden light over grand halls, and rooms so vast they swallowed her small figure whole. She wandered through them with a mixture of awe and unease, her fingers trailing along carved banisters, her eyes wide at the opulence that surrounded her. Every sound the echo of her own footsteps, the rustle of silk curtains, the faint murmur of servants moving unseen reminded her that she had crossed into a life she had never believed possible. Yet, with the wonder came an undercurrent of tension she could not shake. The judge, with his sharp gaze and inscrutable expression, had not explained what his choice meant beyond the cryptic words of the day. Did this mean she was a bride, a guest, a curiosity? Each time she approached him, hoping for reassurance, he would smile in that unsettling way, his eyes glittering with amusement, and say nothing concrete. He allowed her a room, proper meals, and quiet instructions, but no answers. "Patience, Elsie," he told her once, his voice low and deliberate, "and the world will reveal itself." The ambiguity gnawed at her, leaving her restless, anxious, and desperately searching for understanding in the ornate halls of the mansion. Servants whispered among themselves, casting furtive glances toward her, some with pity, some with curiosity, others with barely concealed scorn. She sensed the judgment in their eyes, the hushed murmurs about her sighs, her quiet demeanor, the very presence she carried with an unassuming dignity that was unfamiliar in this environment. Each day, Elsie felt the weight of scrutiny press down on her like a physical force. The expectations of strangers, and the unpredictable whims of the judge, creating a pressure she had never known. She learned quickly that every movement, every word, even every glance mattered. A single misstep could draw laughter or disdain. A single moment of hesitation could confirm their judgments. And yet, despite the scrutiny and the isolation, there were moments that caught her off guard. Moments that stirred something unfamiliar but welcome in her chest. The judge, for all his amusement and unpredictable behavior, occasionally showed small hints of genuine attention. A passing remark about her curiosity, a fleeting acknowledgement of her kindness toward a servant or an animal in the estate's stables. Even a rare smile that did not carry mockery was enough to confuse her, to make her question whether there was more to his intentions than she could see. Each time, she found herself drawn into a complicated dance of caution and hope, unsure if she was being tested, studied, or merely entertained. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the horizon, casting long shadows across the marble floors, Elsie wandered into the estate gardens, seeking some measure of solace. The air was cool and fragrant, filled with the scent of roses and earth, a world removed from the stifling grandeur inside. Her fingers brushed over the petals, soft and delicate beneath her touch, and for the first time in days, her mind felt calm. That calm was shattered by the sudden sound of the judge's voice behind her. "You have a rare way of seeing things, Elsie," he said, his tone calm but carrying a weight that made her heart skip. "Most would never notice the small, quiet beauty of this place. But you see what others overlook." Her breath caught, a swirl of confusion and cautious hope rising in her chest. I just like to notice," she said softly, unsure if her voice sounded small or foolish. The judge's gaze lingered on her, intense and penetrating, as if he were looking past the surface of her words, searching for the truth beneath. "Be careful, though," he murmured, the amusement in his voice fading into something darker. "Seeing too much can be dangerous. It can make you vulnerable in ways you do not yet understand." The cryptic warning unsettled her more than any previous encounter. She wanted to ask questions, to seek clarity, but the estate itself seemed to conspire against her. Corridors stretching endlessly, servants' whispers fading into silence, and shadows lengthening around her like silent sentinels. Days turned into weeks, and Elsie began to learn the rhythms of this strange new life. She found solace in small routines, feeding the animals in the stables, walking through the hidden paths of the gardens, tending to plants and flowers that seemed to flourish under her care. She discovered that some of the servants, despite their initial suspicion, had quietly grown fond of her. One older maid, a woman named Clara, confided that the judge rarely took an interest in anyone, and that her selection was not an accident. "He doesn't laugh at you because he despises you," Clara whispered one evening as they arranged flowers in the sunroom. "He watches because he sees something in you that no one else does." The words warmed Elsie, though they also carried the weight of uncertainty. What did it mean to be seen in this way, and how far could it take her? Yet the tension never fully lifted. Each day brought subtle challenges and moments of discomfort. The judge invited townspeople to the estate, creating situations that forced her into the public eye, where she was subjected to whispers, judgments, and awkward attention. Each interaction was a trial, a test of her endurance and her courage. She could feel the unspoken stakes pressing down, a sense that her every choice, every reaction, could shift the balance of power in this strange game she had entered. And through it all, Judge Harlan remained an enigma, sometimes distant, sometimes attentive, always watching, his intentions obscured by layers of charm, amusement, and cryptic authority. One evening, the tension reached a crescendo. Elsie had been walking near the edge of the gardens when she stumbled upon a hidden door, partially concealed by ivy and shadows. Curiosity, that same trait the judge had once remarked upon, compelled her to push it open. Inside, she discovered a small chamber filled with papers, maps, and objects that seemed both ordinary and extraordinary. Her fingers traced the edges of documents that detailed the judge's dealings, his travels, and glimpses of a life that was far more complicated and shadowed than the public imagined. She realized then that the estate, the laughter, the spectacle of it, was only a fragment of something larger, something intricate and perhaps dangerous. Suddenly, a shadow fell across the doorway. The judge's voice, quiet but commanding, filled the room. "Curiosity is a gift, Elsie, but it can also be a burden," he said. She froze, heart pounding, unsure whether she had been caught or invited. His eyes, steady and unreadable, fixed on her with an intensity that made the air between them crackle. "Some truths are meant to be discovered slowly, carefully, or they can destroy you before you even understand them." Her mind raced, a torrent of fear, anticipation, and awe coursing through her. She had glimpsed a part of his world that few ever saw, and now she understood that her journey was far from simple. As he stepped closer, she could feel the weight of expectation, judgment, and perhaps something else she could not yet name. The world outside the chamber seemed to fall away, leaving only the two of them, caught in a fragile balance of power, curiosity, and unspoken secrets. And in that moment, Elsie realized the truth. This was not merely a story of a girl chosen for spectacle, but the beginning of a life-altering journey where every choice, every observation, every act of courage would shape not just her future, but the very fabric of the world she had entered. And just as she began to speak, to ask the question that burned in her chest, the sound of voices from the main hall shattered the fragile silence. A visitor had arrived, someone unexpected, someone whose presence would complicate everything. The judge's gaze flicked toward the door, a shadow of tension crossing his face for the first time since she had arrived. Elsie's heart raced, a mixture of fear and anticipation gripping her like a vice. Whoever it was, she knew instantly that her life was about to change again, and in ways she could not yet imagine. The world outside had grown silent in anticipation, the estate holding its breath, as Elsie Miller stood on the precipice of a truth far larger than herself, a truth that promised danger, revelation, and a challenge unlike any she had faced before. And just like that, the laughter of the judge, the spectacle of her selection, and the whispers of the town faded into something far more profound, far more terrifying, and far more impossible to ignore. The day the stranger arrived, Elsie felt a chill crawl down her spine. The visitor's presence carried a weight she could not name, a tension that made the grand halls feel smaller, the chandeliers dimmer. Judge Harlan stood at the entrance, his usual composure fractured by a rare flicker of unease. Elsie's heart raced as she stepped forward, sensing that whatever was coming would change everything. The stranger, tall and cloaked in shadows, looked at her with eyes that held recognition, memory, and an unexpected tenderness. A gasp escaped her lips, and suddenly the room seemed to shrink, the air thick with anticipation. "You," the stranger whispered, voice trembling. "It's really you." The words struck her like lightning. In that instant, the carefully constructed world of the estate, the whispered judgments, and the judge's cryptic games faded. She recognized him, her long-lost brother, the one she had thought was gone forever, taken by circumstances she had never understood. Tears blurred her vision as memories came flooding back, childhood laughter, stolen moments of joy, and the ache of years spent apart. The judge, watching silently, allowed the reunion to unfold without interruption, his expression unreadable but his eyes softer than she had ever seen. Her brother rushed forward, enveloping her in an embrace that shook them both. "I searched for you," he whispered into her hair. Every day, I never gave up. Elsie clung to him, the years of loneliness and doubt dissolving in a torrent of emotion. The estate, the grandeur, the spectacle of her being chosen, none of it mattered now. What mattered was this connection, this truth, this revelation that the life she had endured, the humiliation she had faced, had led her to this very moment. Judge Harlan cleared his throat, his voice carrying a quiet authority that made the room hush. You see, he said, looking at Elsie with an intensity that softened the finality of his earlier laughter. Life is not about what others expect of you. It is about the choices you make, the courage you carry, and the heart you never let break. I chose you not because of what the world saw, but because of who you truly are. The words hit her with an unexpected force. For years, she had felt invisible, overlooked, and judged. Yet here was a man of influence telling her that her worth had never depended on appearances, status, or approval. A silence fell, heavy but peaceful, as if the walls themselves were absorbing the weight of the moment. Elsie looked around the room. The servants, her brother, the judge, and felt a surge of gratitude and awe. She realized that this strange, harrowing journey, full of mockery and challenge, had revealed a deeper truth, that value, strength, and love often come in unexpected forms, and that the courage to face ridicule, fear, and uncertainty is what defines a life worth living. As evening light poured through the tall windows, painting the room in hues of gold and amber, Elsie smiled through her tears. She had been chosen in the most unlikely way, but the choice had led her to the most extraordinary revelation of all. She had found family, respect, and the undeniable truth of her own worth. And in that moment, standing between her brother and the judge, she knew that nothing, no laughter, no judgment, no challenge could ever diminish the strength she had carried all along. The story of the obese Amish girl became more than a spectacle. It became a testament to courage, resilience, and the power of seeing beyond appearances. And as Elsie held her brother's hand, feeling the warmth of belonging for the first time in years, she understood something profound. The world may mock, judge, and underestimate you, but the heart that refuses to shrink, the spirit that refuses to break, will always find its way into a life of true meaning. If this story touched your heart and reminded you of the power of courage and hope, join our community by subscribing. Hit like to support more stories that inspire, shock, and move us all. Share this journey with someone who needs to hear it, and together, let's keep these incredible tales alive.